the speaker on. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Before we start the meeting today, those who are able, I invite you to stand so that we can have a moments of quiet reflection to remember not only the victims of the fatal attacks in June, but more recently of Sergeant Graham Saville, who died in the line of duty. Thank you. Chief Constable, on behalf of all the panel members, can we, through you, extend our deepest sympathy to the family. Thank you. Welcome everyone. I'll now go through the agenda. Can I go to minutes of the last meeting held on the 5th of June? And first of all, ask if there's any comments members want to make or any questions. Are people content to accept those as a true record?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you, members. That takes us to item 2 of the agenda. Can we welcome Councillor Paul Taylor to the panel as the representative of Newark and Sherwood District Council? Welcome, Councillor. Any apologies for absence?
Thank you. We have one apology today. We've had an apology from Councillor Woodings from Nottingham City Council, and today she's being substituted by Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. That takes us to declaration of interest by members and officers. Can I start with, first of all, disclosable pecuniary interests? Non-declared. Private interests, pecuniary or non-pecuniary? We have two councillors putting their hands up.
Shall I go first?
Yes, please.
It might be a disclosable pecuniary interest. I didn't put my thing up. I'm disclosing an interest because twice in the report it mentions under grant aid Transform Training, which is the place that I work for full time, and the Chief Executive of Transform Training. So the grants that we receive from the Police and Crime Commissioner are disclosable.
Thank you, Councillor Cohen. Thank you, Councillor Carlton.
Thank you, Chairman. Just standing one from me as a personal interest in item 7, the Commissioner's update report, as it makes reference to the Sutton Shoes Partnership that I chair.
Thank you very much. Any other interest to be declared? No, thank you. That takes us then to item 5, the work programme. I'll hand over to our learned colleague.
Thank you. We have the panel's work programme as it currently stands in front of members. If members wish to add any items to the work programme, then please raise them and we can get them added. And nothing in particular to raise at this point in time other than that.
Any questions or comments at all? There's just two for me to just mention. One is I think we're in conversation about arranging some training and some visits to police headquarters. I think that's sort of been on the back burner over the summer months, but I think the Commissioner extended that invitation. We'll try and fix a date which hopefully, particularly for new members who haven't been before, will be welcomed, but we'll contact everyone when we've got a bit more information off the Commissioner's timetable and the chief's timetable. So thank you for that. With having quite a few new members, it's quite helpful to pay a visit as soon as possible. And the other is just to remind people that we will be receiving details of the conference, and once we've got the conference details for members, we'll let them know. Are people content to move on then? Thank you. Keep switching that off. That takes us then to item 6. And first of all, thank you, Commissioner, for your Police and Crime Panel annual report. Is there any particular things you want to take us through before we launch into our questions?
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'll just talk about a few things briefly, so we've got lots of time for questions. And my first start by saying thank you so much for that minute silence. It's been a tough time for Nottinghamshire Police, and it means a lot that we did that together. Thank you. And also, I just want to thank my amazing team here for putting this annual report together. It's been an extremely busy and productive year, and I thank you for your support on scrutinising me on that too. We put this together to show you what we've been doing, but it's been really helpful. So if I just briefly talk about my themes of preventing, responding and supporting, I'll just highlight a few things that I'm particularly proud of. You know, I have a passion for working with children and young people, and you'll see here that in the report 2,800 young people have been supported by diversion and mentoring schemes. And the outcomes include improved resilience, well-being, increased self-esteem and positive progression into education, training, employment. And we've also, on the preventing side, a real increased focus on reducing school exclusions, because we know that when young folk get out of school, there's real vulnerabilities there. With regard to responding, so we can respond. We did a big exercise and we recruited the fantastic new Chief Constable behind us, and we're really getting some good outcomes. The significant crime reductions, we have burglary down 35%, vehicle crime down 28%, robbery 21%, violence with injury down 9%. So we've got more police on the streets, and the streets are becoming safer. We've also continued with the highly successful Operation Reach model, operating across all the neighbourhood policing teams. And this has helped to achieve around 1,900 arrests, 380 warrants, 638 searches and seizure of 632 vehicles, and 463 weapons, and a big chunk of cash, £998,000 in cash, and 762 individual seizures of drugs. Also, we've recovered more than £933,000 in criminal assets, and that's an increase of 94% on the previous year and 42% on the 2019 pre-COVID launch. It's pre-COVID, yeah. We've launched the Antisocial Behaviour Task Force. I'm really aware that antisocial behaviour is something that our communities are really an area of concern. And we've got the new Nottingham Fraud Partnership, which is multi-agency partners working together, tackling these really important issues. And if I just move on to supporting, around 20,000 people have received reports from our commission victim services called Victim Care. And from that, 90% of those receiving enhanced support felt better able to cope with everyday life, which was an increase of 8% on the previous year. Quick whistle stop of some of the things I'm most proud of, and I'm very happy to answer lots of questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm sure we've got some questions to you about your annual report. Councillor Edwards, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Some very positive statements made about reductions in crime in the areas in which those reductions have been seen. Big numbers quoted. I just wondered if you shared the perception that we have that we're not sharing in that progress in the city. I wonder if that was a perception that you have, whether you have a sense of what the numbers are, and whether you think theft from shops fits in within the remarks that you're making.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Edwards. I'll be really honest, retail crime has gone up. That is a national issue. It's not just specific to Nottinghamshire. And actually, we did something called what did SABA stand for? Business action. Sorry, it's that thing where you know things are initials and you can't remember what it stands for. We had a SABA day recently where it was hosted. Well, I invited people down. It was from the National Retail Crime people, and they were really happy with the work we were doing in Nottinghamshire. And actually, on BBC last Friday, the Co-op said that it's named 3 forces: Nottinghamshire, Sussex, and Kent as being best practice in actually tackling retail crime. And what they liked about it was the fact that we were grouping together offences from prolific offenders, because most of retail crime is done by a very small amount of people who do the it's like the Pareto, isn't it? 8-20. These really prolific criminals. It can be highly organised as well, and they're the ones that have been really the targeting to get. There was one particular person who did 56 different crimes, but he's now inside.
What's your perception of why the city isn't sharing in the downward figures that you've quoted for the constabulary as a whole?
Thank you.
That's the first specific point. Minor point, I mean, it is interesting the Co-op are saying what they're saying. Certainly my local police feel the Co-op aren't quite doing enough. So there would be that particular local point to make. But Operation Reacher, I think I do have to acknowledge some of the progress that's been made with Operation Reacher. I know the Chief Constable knows of my concerns about aspects of that, but I'm still in situations where I've got specific alleyways. Saw it only this morning. Where people are operating from. I'm aware that some kind of arrest has been made in the past. Not quite clear where we haven't got to the stage whereby those arrests have led to something in court. So it just don't feel as positive as the report is reporting with respect to what's happening in the city. Now, in your partnership working with the city, are you even able to make the meetings anymore?
Yes, I'm coming on Friday.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah, but there was one on Friday, or there's one coming?
I want to call it the CDP. It's got a fancy name now, hasn't it? I still think of it as a crime and drug partnership. Sorry, I know it's been rebranded, but yes, I am there on Friday.
It's coming Friday.
Yes, it's
yeah, I know, but we've been short, haven't we, of people being at previous partnership meetings.
Yeah, we've always had a representative from the Office of Police and Crime Commission. It hasn't always been me, I'll be honest, because sometimes I have to be in different places.
Yeah, not quite sure I heard what you said properly, so I'll ask it again. You're saying someone from your office is always there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I just wonder
I've got this amazing team. I can't do it all by myself.
No, and I don't want to make an unreasonable point. I don't.
Yeah.
But let me just try it again then. Have you got a sense that the numbers are not right in the city and that more action is needed there? And would you appreciate the offer of more help in terms of capacity from the city, in terms of the partnership work we used to be able to do with the police commissioner, so we could actually achieve more together?
Okay. Thank you. I haven't got the figures off the top of my head for my city, and I know there's more work I'd like to do everywhere. And there are pockets like retail crime has gone up everywhere. I'm really keen to continue with the partnership work that we do in the city. Unfortunately, that the last meeting I'd got planned with Mel Barrett and the Councillor Dave Mellon, they cancelled, but we have got another one in the diary.
To finish, I think that you could get more out of this if you give us some more time to actually get more done. And I think that there's some focus needed because the fact we're going backwards compared to the rest of the county.
It sounds to me, Councillor and Commissioner, there's a sort of missing link conversation that needs to take place, and we can't deal with it now this afternoon. There's clearly a perception from Councillor Edwards that the city feels slightly less favoured, and I think you're trying to say it's not because I've got proof, and there's always a member of staff there.
There is always a member of staff there, and the relationships in the city are massively important, and they've not been ignored. Can I just bring? You talked about stats. Can I just bring my stat person in? Sorry, that's not the best title for you, but you know what I mean.
I like it. So I don't actually have the stats, the latest stats to hand, but my understanding is that the city has been one of the quickest areas to return to the pre-COVID norm. So we've seen that increase where a lot of the other areas are still seeing a reduction. And a lot of it, as you suggest, is linked to the low-level acquisitive crime, shoplifting. As a big driver of that increase in a couple of the urban concentrations across the force, in fact. We are taking forward some work through the Reducing Reoffending Board, and particularly around supporting women and girls in the criminal justice system who are disproportionately represented among those with sort of complex needs in relation to shoplifting. So there's a programme of work that we are taking forward to look at that more closely.
So it kind of reaffirms my point, although I'm trying not just to do retail, that there's something going wrong in the city with respect to the rest of the county that needs extra capacity and extra focus. And that's the point I'm making, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner, did you want to come back?
Just one more little short thing, just to give you one example, Councillor Edwards. There's a new round of Safer Streets called Safer Street 5, which we've got £1 million worth of funding for. Which most police and crime commissioners are either having 2 bids or 3 areas they're tackling. I was determined to tackle all of our CSP areas, so the 3 around the county and the CSP in the city. But actually the city didn't meet criteria, so I'm using £333,000 of our Office of Police and Crime Commissioner money to make sure that the city get parity with what we're doing in the other CSP areas. There's one example that's coming out of our funds to make sure the city isn't left out.
Thank you, Commissioner. I've got quite a few more colleagues want to ask questions from your report. I think Councillor Taylor is the next one. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner, you mentioned more police on the streets. And as you'll be aware, in Newark, we've had a serious problem with antisocial behaviour in the centre. And we held a summit, which unfortunately you weren't able to make, and hopefully be able to make the one in October. But that has seen extra policing in the town centre, which is having an effect, along with the rest of the projects that we put forward. The trouble is, that is only temporary, the additional officers. Newark is very, very short of police officers. And only a week last Friday, I went out for a full shift with the response team, and there were 4 officers on response, which doesn't sound a lot to me when 2 of them were only in their first 6 months, and 2 were brought in from another town. But during the shift, all 4 officers were actually in Mansfield within the custody suite as a result of the custody suite in Newark being used as a uniform storeroom. It was only originally mothballed. So could you please advise me how you're going to ensure we get more officers on a permanent basis in Newark to tackle problems, and also when you plan to get the custody suite back opened so that we don't have to move all our response officers out of Newark to take prisoners, meaning there's no one to respond to incidents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor, and welcome. It was good to go out with you in Newark when we did. A few things there. I'm sorry I couldn't get to that ASB meeting. It was actually just they didn't ask if I was available. I'd got a national meeting that day. I would endeavour to get to the next one. You mentioned being short of police officers in Newark. It's up to the Chief Constable and the demand to where her police officers go. I cannot make more police officers in a certain area. But I just wanted to give you some reassurance that no, police officers do go where they're demanded to be. You weren't on the police and crime panel when I first started. At that point, there was a plan to close Newark Police Station, sell it and to move to come into the new building near the council. I actually looked at the business case around that, and actually we managed. The building was too big, and it was costing too much money to run it. But we managed to sell a little bit off at the back to ambulance to get a nice receipt of money, and the bit downstairs, which had been mothballed, the custody suite, that was empty space, and we've used every bit of it to make sure we're using the space wisely. And actually, there's not a lot you can do with that place because it's old custody suite, so we are using it as a clothing stores. I'm going to disappoint you now because I'm going to say there are no plans to reopen that as a custody suite. At the moment, we have enough places in custody. It's the same across the country. A lot of small custody suites have closed, and there's now, same in Derbyshire, they have less custody suites, but they've got the custody suites have got the right facilities for the detainees. I know when demand is needed, because an example, I was in Basildor at the weekend, and they needed the police out there, so a prison handler team came up to get the people who've been arrested. So that can happen, but that's up to where the demand needs to be. I'm sorry it's not the answer you want, but I'm just being straight.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that you can't dictate to the Chief Constable where their officers are, but what I would ask is that pressure be brought as much as you can to improve the policing of Newark, and you can commit to do that, I'm sure. As far as the custody suite's concerned, the amount of money it costs to wipe out the policing of Newark to take prisoners to Mansfield is costing a lot of money in a lot of time and reducing policing for the people of Newark. And I would urge you to at least review that decision and to look at reopening it. Yes, it is only a 10-cell unit, but if it means that officers can actually arrest people, because they tell me that they often don't arrest people where they would have done previously because of the amount of time it takes to take them to Mansfield. Newark people are losing out, and I'd ask you to review that, please.
Demand for custody suite will be constantly reviewed, and also demand for where police officers need to be, but that is absolutely the Chief Constable's responsibility. But with that really small custody suite, it didn't make financial sense. My understanding was because of, for that you've got to have the amount of staff you would need for that custody suite just doesn't make sense. The numbers, it is actually better value to have bigger custody suites with all the right provisions in, because the numbers crunching didn't work.
But could I just suggest that there's more to talking about policing than the budget, and that there is about public perception of policing in Newark. And I can tell you the public perception, even though the officers we have do a fantastic job. The public perception is that there's not enough officers, and one of the reasons for that is because they're spending their time taking people to Mansfield rather than having a smaller unit which actually allows them to arrest people and take them in fairly quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. We're still on the annual report, and I've got more people waiting yet. I've got Councillor Richardson and then Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. I must just, before I ask you this question, I must reiterate my story is identical. They're in the town hall now, taking up my car space, which is, I get cross out. But I saw a police car coming out of the town hall in the car park across the road on his own, taking somebody in. He couldn't walk and tell that guy, just wait while I go and get a car. And they're only going to cross the road. And that's what they do around the town because they have no choice, because they've got to take them to Mansfield anyway. And you're taking them off the beat. And this has come from an officer walking the beat, saying, you might see me now, because everybody's taking photographs because you never see a policeman. So they were joking. It wasn't anything rude. Because we have to, if we arrest anyone here, you'll not see us again for a few hours because we have to go to Mansfield, take them, and that's it. And now we have the same problem. So I won't go on about that. But my question to you is, you've recruited 418 new officers, and in the minutes of last time, that's what you stated. But now you're saying that those new recruitments, some of those will not stay in Nottinghamshire. Could you please tell me, it's in the report, could you please tell me what percentage will not be in Nottinghamshire and how you divide those 418? You've answered some of it, but why those four? I'm not sure I get that. It's quite contradictory. Thank you.
I'd really like to get back to you with a good answer on that. There's, and I might need to do some of that afterwards if that's okay. There was a chunk of additional officers. I got to the original uplift figure, and because the Met weren't able to recruit, I asked if we could have extra money in Nottinghamshire to have extra officers here. We've got more experienced officers quickly. We never, unless we get extra budget, we never plan to keep all of those officers. Whether some of the officers are working in EMSU, which is our regional collaboration, we're certainly not recruiting and training them here at a great cost for them to move somewhere else.
Would you mind just getting back to
me,
I will, please,
thank
you. And write something, because I'd need to know to take back to the council exactly what you mean by that and how much budget and percentage it's going to be. That would be really helpful.
Thank you. I will. Can I get back to you?
You can, yes. Thank you very much.
Send a copy to the minute taker, please, so we can add that into the meeting for everyone. Thank you.
Sorry, would it be possible if you could just let us know where that is so we can find that? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, thank you. And then I've got Leslie Dalby, thank you.
You'd offered me.
No. It's Mrs. Dalby now, isn't it? Thank you.
Sorry, I'm looking at pages 42 and 43 of your report, and there's a huge amount of grants that have been awarded and third sector organisations supported, but I get no feel at all of where this money has gone in terms of the geography across the county. And I do believe we asked at a previous meeting if you could provide us with that information so we could actually see where it's all been allocated in terms of monies across the county.
Nicola, can I just bring you in, please, as Commissioner?
Yeah, of course, and I apologise if we haven't provided information that's been requested. Yes, we'll do a visual map to show you where it's gone. We have recently just invested in some new software that many OPCCs have got that is able to show in a very visual way what money goes where, and you can search it by theme, you can search it by geography. So we haven't quite got that up and running yet, but it's coming.
Yes. Nicola, talk about the theory of change and how we evaluate. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So we have a theory of change. So every organisation that applies for funding, if it's more than just a few £1,000s, they've developed something called a theory of change, which sets out very clearly what they want to achieve over time with some milestones along the way. And we are working with organisations to look at what they're doing and to make sure that they are realising those benefits, and that will all come in time. We can report on it. Well, so we can look at it. I think the sensible time to look at it is at the end of the financial year, because that's a big milestone. So some of the there's lots of grants that have been given, but some of those grants are quite small, and we need to be proportionate in our reporting requirements. So the end of the financial year is a key point. We can look at it then. We do get some reporting in October, so could therefore bring something towards the end of the year if you wanted something sooner. Depends what you would like.
Do you want to come back? Is that okay? Thank you. I've got Councillor Inglis and then Councillor Mohammed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, just going back to sort of questions from Councillor Taylor and Councillor Richardson regarding officer numbers. I read with dismay a report last month regarding officers leaving from Notts. There was 65 left voluntary up till March last year, which was an increase on the previous year. But we're looking at 4,500 across the country, aren't we? England and Wales. So are those figures included in the uplift final total, or are they lost? Can you just clarify that for us?
Okay. We always expect to, people will retire, people choose to move on. So we always expect to lose some officers. We're doing a lot better than our regional colleagues, and actually nationally. Would it be okay to come in with it, because you've got all those figures? Okay.
Yes, when we do the workforce planning, you try and take account of what you're expecting in terms of leavers, starters, and also keeping in mind, obviously, at the moment, the uplift programme target that we do have to maintain in order to ensure we can claim the full grant that we're able to claim if we maintain those numbers. So at the moment, we're actually over and above. So obviously we estimated some people would leave in this current year, and they haven't, which has obviously enabled us to help out that national picture in terms of keeping on a few more people above our actual uplift target to help out with the national target. But obviously when it comes to budget setting again, we will be looking to maintain our uplift target if that's what the national position needs us to maintain, but nothing over and above it at this stage.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think it's important we do keep that level rather than we've got that level and then there's hidden numbers leaving. So that's good. Thank you.
Wages is my most expensive bill, so they're all over the numbers and making sure we're keeping them. Thank you.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Inglis? Sorry. Content. Thank you. Councillor Mohammed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to thank the Chief Constable and the Commissioner for the great work and support they gave the city on the terrible tragedy of June the 13th, with the tragic loss of life of 3 citizens within the city of Nottingham. And the two key learnings that came out of that, one is the city's ability to have trust and confidence within its diverse communities, and the ability to give reassurance, and the ability for communities to show resilience and work with the police and the city council. And the other was the strength of our partnerships, and particularly the new community safety partnership. I know the Police Crime Commissioner has lots of partnerships in a report: a violence reduction partnership, domestic abuse partnership, health and wellbeing. I was interested in how she navigates the priorities, given that there isn't sometimes necessarily alignment between her plan and the priorities of the partnership. And how does she also navigate the priorities in terms of resource allocation, given that there might be surplus in her budget and that lots of funding goes to short-term projects, but not necessarily building the infrastructure of the partnerships. So we're having sufficient officers in place to manage those projects. With a city perspective, of course.
Thank you, Councillor Mohammed, and thank you for the work we did together during Op Hendricks. We really appreciated your support, and Nottingham is a really special place for our partnerships and how our city pulled together then, and it was one Nottingham, wasn't it? And it was the eyes of the world were on us, and I think we should all be really proud of what we achieved together. Who wants to come in to talk about because we were mapping it, weren't we, all the different meetings?
So there is a piece of work which we're doing at the moment, which is mapping the meetings, mapping the terms of reference, and aligning it to our delivery plan. And I think that's still early days, but that's what we're doing. In terms of the funding, and what we do is everything comes back to the police and crime plan. So it's informed by the police and crime plan and the police and crime needs assessment, which Dan and his team produce, which tells us about emerging needs, so that we can feed that into latest rounds of funding. In terms of the funding, what the Commissioner has done with our Make Not Safe funding is it is multi-year funding. So we identified some key priorities which you'll be aware of around hidden harm, hate crime. There's a communities fund, rural crime, and that funding has been allocated over years, and we will be reporting back on the benefits of that funding. But there is funding that comes up every year that can respond to emerging priorities. So, for example, the community chest, the latest round of community chest funding, which has either just been launched or is just about to be launched, does include a specific hate crime funding. And we're aware that organisations were telling us that as a result of what happened in June, they're experiencing greater hate crime. So what we've done is really emphasise the hate crime funding within that, and are encouraging organisations to apply for it so that we can respond in that way. But the general point around how funding priorities map across to the wider work is something that we are looking at, but we look at it on an ongoing basis, informed by the police and crime needs assessment.
And the community chest has actually launched for local organisations to put grants applications there.
I mean, I would just add that priority setting piece is getting much easier the more we join up in terms of our needs assessments and analytical work. It all leads us towards the same ultimate conclusions in terms of the key priorities, the areas of greatest risk, harm, vulnerability, and so on. So I do feel that we're probably much more joined up, certainly across the county, than we've ever been before, because they now rely quite heavily on our shared police and crime needs assessment.
Just see, the county, I accept there's a lot of joined up work. It's the city perspective I was talking about, how we get alignment, but also your allocation of funding specifically towards the infrastructure of the partnership, not necessarily the project work of the partnership, but something we could discuss on Friday, Karen, in detail. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, you wanted to come in. Is it on the same topic or something different?
Something different.
Far away.
Thank you. You've mentioned the youth charter within your report, and you're aware of the antisocial behaviour in Newark. One of the things that is really needed to address that issue is actually to have some youth work go on in the town centre. I've noticed that you have some funding underspends at the moment, and I was wondering whether you'd be willing to potentially fund 2 youth outreach workers for a year, so that we can actually really tackle the problem, so that we don't have to draft more police back in again. And very finally, when will you be announcing Safer Streets 5 results, please?
Pass across to Nicola, thank you.
Yeah, so 2 questions, I think. So on Newark first, we have had a conversation. So I had a conversation with Matt Finch from Newark a few weeks ago, and there was a funding request put in to us for a number of initiatives. And I'm sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what was contained within that. I don't think there was the costing for 2 workers, but what the Commissioner has been able to do is to respond to that funding request, and has actually put in additional funding at Newark's request. And I think that was very much around initiatives to try to some youth diversion initiatives, as well as others, to try and tackle ASB. On Safer Streets 5, we're still waiting, and I checked with a colleague this morning. You'll all be aware, we're very aware, that the current funding finishes on Saturday, and we're supposed to know about the next round of funding, which starts on Sunday, and we don't yet know. So we know the Home Office have got the proposals, we know they're asking questions about it, and then they've come back with some more questions. We're responding to that as a priority. We're waiting to hear.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Carlton and Councillor Ellis. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for bringing me in. Just to quickly turn to page 33 of your report. Really, the first point will be a thank you, then followed by a question. Also, as I alluded to earlier in my declarations of interest, I chair the Sutton Shoes Partnership for the county. Just to be clear that the City Council has their own arrangements. I just really wanted to thank you, Commissioner, for your support and also that of your team. It's obviously been a very testing first year, rolling out something so comprehensive. Maybe it's something that you're not possibly aware of, and I just want to bring to attention. Obviously, the From Harm to Hope strategy really put a different focus on getting more people into treatment programs, providing support, and I think it really recognised we couldn't just police our way out of these matters. Recently, officers from this council met with the Office for Health Improvement and Disparities. It's been confirmed that Nottinghamshire County Council is the only local authority in England to hit its national targets in the respect of getting more people into treatment. So it's a really big thank you to them, as I know your team and yourself are a really big key part of this. And whilst, as you referenced with Operation Reacher about taking the drugs off the streets, breaking the supply chains, there's also that recognition as a public health outcome to this. The point for the question, looking at criminal justice treatment pathways, would you agree with me in our existing custody suites, without opening Pandora's box, of course? Do you think there's more that we can do to enhance the service within the custody suites to shorten down those treatment pathways?
Short answer, yes. And out of court disposals could work really well there, can't it? Can you come in, Nicola?
Yeah, of course. So I think out of court disposals potentially can help. I think you'll all be aware that there are different substance misuse services in the city and in the county. There is a much higher representation of the substance misuse service in the custody suite in the city than there is in the county, and there have been different views about that and the effectiveness of that across the partnership for a really long time. So, ever since I've been working at the OPCC, there was a very helpful and productive meeting last week, chaired by one of your public health consultants, bringing together the OPCC, the treatment provider, but also the custody manager, to look at what we could do to make that more effective going forward. And that was a very helpful and productive meeting, and I think there'll be a more consistent my understanding is there'll be a more consistent presence in custody by the treatment service just as soon as that can be put in place. But the thing that I would add to it is I don't think it's just about custody. I think there are opportunities for far more referrals from the force and from other criminal justice agencies into treatment. And we're really aware that the target that you've got, and it's great that those are being met, the target is very specifically around the prison to community pathway, but actually it'd be really great to see all the criminal justice referrals uplifted by 20%, and our office is bringing together a multi-agency group just to look at what we can do to identify some of the quite considerable system barriers that are in the way and how we can tackle it. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis and then Councillor Smith. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose mine's a reminder and a comment rather than a question. I see in the report you talk about rural crime being your one of your high priorities, and you mentioned domestic abuse quite regularly. The last meeting of the panel, we asked for information about prosecution and conviction rates on domestic abuse,
and an update on tackling rural crime, which I don't think is in the papers. Just reminded we have asked for that. And the second one's a comment. I mean, the overall the annual report's very heavy on commissioning and that sort of activity, but I think when you come, have I gone? All right. When you come next year for the precept, the council taxpayer will look and say, well, on these figures, 236 million goes to the police, 6 or 7 million goes to the LPCC. So I think the question would be, and it's not in here, what effect has your stewardship of the police had on policing as opposed to the other things you've done? I just think it's a bit power station and bike shed, isn't it? I think there's a big chunk of of the spend that isn't reflected in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. We missed the actions on the panel requested extra information about prosecution and conviction rates. We only spotted them recently, didn't they? Because they weren't flagged up as an action. It was just kind of in the wording. Have got all the numbers, and so we can follow that up on the rural crime update on the prosecution and conviction rates for domestic abuse. With regard to the value that our office adds, obviously holding the police to account to drive up better results for our community, but also without our office, you wouldn't be getting all the. I've got more safer street funding than any other police and crime commissioner in the country. Has been secured through our office. So the extra millions and millions of pounds we're securing is a lot less than the cost of our office.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Ellis?
I don't think that's what I was saying. I accept that its leverage is quite effective. Now, the point I'm making is overall to the council taxpayer, you're asking for 240 million, or something in that region, of which 236 is spent on the police. That isn't reflected, to my mind, in the report.
So the report itself needs to focus a little bit more on that majority section of the budget that is delegated to the Chief Constable. It needs to include a bit more on that in the next iteration, is the feedback.
Thank you for explaining. I was a bit slow on the uptake there. I apologise.
Did you want to come back, Councillor?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, thank you for waiting.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just going back onto the previous conversation where we were talking about Newark and Bassetlaw, I wanted to just mention Eastwood. I know that we've had a few. And as you'll know, a few years ago they closed the front desk at Eastwood Police Station, and they installed a virtual screen for people to communicate. Now, I know that that's since been removed because it didn't work. Have you got any intention of reopening the front desk at Eastwood so people have got a way of communicating better with the police? Because I know that the crime rates are increasing in Eastwood, and we have got particular hotspot areas, especially around Coronation Park and things like that. So have you got any intention of doing something to reopen the front desk at Eastwood Police Station?
If we had millions of pounds extra, yes, we would. But I need to be really honest. Eastwood is really close to my heart because it's where I'm from and grew up. And I remember when there was an active, it was a proper big police station there back in the day. I used to walk past it every day on the way to school. How people report crime now, much fewer people do tend to go to a front desk. That's just, people tend to ring up. Most people have got their own phone that they ring up. So it would be great if we had front desks in every town, but we'll keep reviewing demand. There are some hotspots in Eastwood which the police are going out and tackling, but at the moment there is just that little yellow telephone outside for people to ring through. We'll keep looking at it because I've got a soft spot for Eastwood. Not that I can shout about that too much, but no, how people are reporting policing is and their need to get help has changed. People rather than going into the front desk, more people are just ringing up or going online. And we've also got something very exciting called rapid video response now, which people can do as well.
Did you want to come back, Councillor?
If you may, thank you, Chair. Have you considered at any point where you've got these phone boxes, well, they're not phone, these yellow phone things, looking at putting one of the SafePoint cameras there, so if somebody has got to use the yellow phone to speak to somebody, they can feel very intimidated if there's anyone around them. But if with the SafePoint camera, they can feel safe and secure, knowing that someone's looking at them and protecting them in a certain way, potentially.
We're very fond of our safe refuge cameras. As the first one in the country happened in Sutton. We were there together on Alton Street, weren't we? We are looking about where else we can use those cameras, but they do some amazing data to where it's needed, and I will refer to the police and the stats and Power BI and all that to where it needs to go.
Thank you. Councillor Inglis, thank you.
Thank you. It's perhaps not the right time, but it just comes on the back of the question from Councillor Ellis. When we're asking for information we've asked for before. The last meeting we asked for a breakdown of the staffing structure within the OPCC, which I don't think we've had. But I just noticed last week there's advertising for 5 new posts within the thing. So the question is the clarity really to whether those are new posts, they're replacing people that was left or whatever. So really it's just for clarity and understanding of what the OPC consists of for our understanding, because we don't at the moment. And I just want to pass on my concerns and everybody's thanks for Sharon, and hopefully she gets better back soon and she returns to us.
Thank you, Councillor. The structure of our office, when I started, we did a roles and responsibilities review to get a structure that was more fit for purpose to deliver what we needed to deliver. And we are still following that structure. So we have that mapped, and we can share. We have been very good at bringing in extra money, and when you bring in extra money, you've got to be able to make sure we can give it out properly. So we know there has been an extra. For example, the board. Can I pass across to explain for the posts?
I'm not sure which 5 posts you're referring to, but it's a fair chance that some of them are my team. So there are 2 project lead posts. So one will be for Safer Streets 5, the other one for immediate justice. So those are short-term posts to manage that funding, to help us manage that funding when we get it in. We also recently appointed someone to a FORG project lead. Again, that will be partly funded by some of the FORG projects that we've got some external funding. Again, a short fixed term post. There's also a whole system approach coordinator. I'm not sure if I've got the job title right there, but again, that's partly funded by probation, 50% funded by probation, and that's to drive forward the work, the system-wide work around women and girls in the criminal justice system. We've also recently had a vacancy within my team, very long-standing post, and we've lost her to the county council. So we needed to replace that post. So that may be the ones that you're referring to, but hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour as to why we're recruiting. So our structure should be on the website. We will just check that it is the latest version that's on the website.
Yeah, okay. They're including it. The Safer Leads Board. There was contracts manager, engagement officer, program manager. It came to £200,000. So again, the Commissioner says in her words, wages are important to her, they're important to us for the budget. So if that's available for us the next meeting, that would be brilliant. Thank you.
And one of the reasons for my underspend in my office is that we haven't recruited all the posts that we originally planned to do, because we've been recruiting them gradually.
But we're nice to see that. Thank you.
Councillor Cullen, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner, following on from my colleague Councillor Paul Taylor, I'm not going to make a pitch for money here at this meeting at all. It's nothing to do with that.
Councillor Cullen, you do that regularly anyway.
It is about the youth charter and the the issue of young people. I've been watching the youth charter, but I'm not sure about how much progress has been made. As a full-time professional in the youth sector, I don't see much about it in my work, and I work specifically with young offenders. But also thinking in my role as a counsellor now, the counsellor for the lovely Toten, there's a general increase in really serious antisocial behaviour, not low-level antisocial behaviour, but actually very dangerous, violent antisocial behaviour by young people as young as 10 and 11. And groups, regular reports in all parts of Broxtowe, and I'm sure this is the same for the rest of the county, of groups of upwards of 50 young people gathering, attacking other young people, stealing things from people, being violent towards other young people. And although sometimes the police do respond, and the lack of police officers is a major issue. But although sometimes the police do respond, a number of young people who are very serious, violent young people are given bail conditions that are not monitored at all, and they know they're fireproof. In my own area, a number of young people have bail conditions that ban them from coming into Beeston, and I see them there on a daily basis. And I think the youth charter is absolutely great, and I'm a youth worker. Everything about me is about supporting young people, but we need some help with that, because supporting young people who are out of control and there is no way to put anything in place is a real serious missing. And that, so I want you to consider that and think what you can do about that, not just say, the marvellous stuff we're doing with young people. Across the county and city, marvellous stuff is happening with some young people, and other young people are very dangerous. Yeah.
And thank you, Councillor Cullen, for all the work you do with young people. We've seen what a difference that makes, and particularly the work around Operation Potassium and the young folk that have been involved with that. You've done some fantastic work. Thank you. The youth charter is one tiny bit. I mean, that came from young people about quality youth work and how they would like to be treated with quality youth work. And on the back of that, one of the things we've done is with Base 51, we're now offering youth worker accredited training. So if anybody's got any organisations in their area that want to access, we've paid for through our office youth worker training. We've got a service now, and about 30 new people are starting on Friday this week doing some more training. There's not enough youth work happening. But that's not all on my toes. We've got to work together. And with regards to antisocial behaviour and bail conditions, I don't know why those bail conditions aren't being enforced. I don't know if the Chief Constable would be happy to come in.
In terms of yes, sorry, Councillor. In terms of bail conditions, we do need to be looking at how we monitor those more effectively. Bail has just changed recently that gives us more power to put bail conditions on that we didn't have previously. So what we're now trying to do is to make sure that, exactly as you said, that when we do impose those bail conditions, that they have some meaning and actually there is something we can do if somebody breaches them. We're always subject to the court and what they'll do when we present somebody at court, but we are certainly looking to be able to monitor those much more effectively than we have been doing in the past.
Thank you. I think we're still on the annual plan, even though we may have drifted into one or other things. Councillor Introna, you wanted to come in?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Commissioner, well done on the Safer Streets funding, and as I spoke in the Place Select Committee last week, I made a point to a number of people in that room that you have done some terrific work in bringing additional funding, and I look forward to the additional funding that's hopefully going to be brought in Safer Streets 5. There's been quite a bit of talk about antisocial behaviour, and certainly it is the thing that seems to be high in my in books, and certainly if we look in Bassetlaw, Retford, and Worksop, the two biggest towns, it really is becoming quite a problem for us. And I'd appreciate some advice perhaps for us in Bassetlaw on how we might address some of the particular issues that we're having. A lot of this is around off-roading, off-road bikes in around Retford and Worksop golf courses, antisocial behaviour towards some of the elderly that we see. And I've been dealing with a veteran that's having to deal with antisocial behaviour on a street. He's the one guy that stood up amongst the community and asked someone to stop, and has been on the end of some horrific abuse. And I'd certainly like an opportunity to perhaps discuss with you and the Chief Constable some of the responses he's had when he's reported it, which do concern me. And then another area is in Worksop, where we have the recreation area, the Camch, which is a wonderful park at certain times of the day, and we have a number of CCTV infrastructure there, but it seems to have little effect on some of the young people that frequent the area. And only this weekend we've had an issue where there's a specialist disabled swing where somebody wasn't allowed access, and then the parents were abused by a number of young people and the youngster denied access. And it's how do we address that sort of issue, because we do have some lovely areas in our towns and in our villages, but people aren't using them. They can't use them because of some of the antisocial behaviour that's occurring. So I'd certainly welcome any opportunity to sit down and discuss how we can make these areas better. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just mention the antisocial behaviour task force that we've got the next meeting on? Is it October the 4th?
It's next Tuesday.
October the 4th, and that's that has got a really clear delivery plan of things to achieve. And thank you for taking the lead on that for me, Dan. Also, in January, we're doing an antisocial behaviour immediate justice pilot, and that again, it's more. It's trying a different way to tackle antisocial behaviour. So for people that, I'll give an example. If somebody's been doing graffiti, it will be an expectation that they get rid of it. You know, or just so they really restoratively feel a difference. I was out in Bassetlaw on Saturday night, and I was really surprised by the amount of young, it was actually boys, but the ages of 10 to 15 that were out ridiculously late at night, driving. Some of them were on bikes, just driving. Because actually, I was with a road policing officer, and he got somebody off the road because they were driving down the road, being all leery, on his phone in the dark. And it's just, he was really lucky he wasn't knocked over. With the off-road bikes, which are a real pest and cause massive damage, as well as being noisy and irritating folk, we do have our own off-road team. Though actually on Saturday night we had something called Operation Star, where we had an off-road team who were right at the top of the county because they're from South Yorkshire, and they were going out to address things as well. Can I just bring Dan in to add? Thank you.
So just sort of building on the antisocial behaviour task force, which is meeting next Tuesday. So it's been working to sort of align policies and procedures and definitions and understanding of ASB across all of the local authorities in Notts. As part of our delivery plan, there's an action to identify 8 priority hotspot localities for ASB across Nottinghamshire. That will obviously be informed by the data that we've got, but we know that a lot of ASB, including ASB that impacts most greatly on particular communities, isn't reported. So I think it would be really helpful to come to hear about sort of those localities and issues that you're being informed of, so that we can feed it into this plan really and look at it in the round alongside the data that we hold.
Yeah, and the Canch, for example, they've got extra light and they've got a CCTV safe refuge camera up there as well.
Dare I say, the kids don't care that there's CCTV up there because there's no consequences for them. I don't want to get crass and get into a debate about officer numbers, but an officer now and again, or being in some of these areas and giving some immediate counselling to challenge behaviour when it's needed might be helped. The other thing that I am concerned about is people saying to me they don't bother ringing it in because they don't get a response. And sometimes, and this is from someone I trust, where we report some antisocial behaviour and they're told it's not a priority. It's not really what they need to hear. If we can't get officers there for one reason or another, fine. I appreciate that there's always going to be other things happening in the area. But my concern is that people are saying to me, we're just not bothering reporting it. And I'm saying that you have to. You really do need to ring 101. That all adds into the data analysis, etc., etc.
And thank you. And please do keep telling folk to report it. It's not helpful, keep saying the narrative that there's no police officers up there, because they are. And if you keep saying there's no police officers up there, people aren't going to report it. Can I just bring Dan in to talk about the police and crime survey that we do, which actually looks at antisocial behaviour as well. So these aren't people that are reporting it, it's a prevalence, because you might have some figures there. Yeah.
Can I just stop you, because I've read the police and crime survey in some detail as we've had discussions on before, particularly when we're talking about police stations and infrastructure, so you don't need to go through that.
So the latest police and crime survey, we had the results last week for the July to September tranche of surveys, and that did indicate that for the first time in the latest quarter we have seen a reduction in the proportion of residents that have experienced ASB. So I think it's dropped from around 65% to 61% in the last quarter. And we also asked people that have experienced ASB the impact that it had on their quality of life. On a scale of 1 to 10, and we've seen a drop. We've seen a drop in the drop in the sort of the high impact ASB that's being reported. Granted, that won't reach necessarily every pocket, every community across Nottinghamshire, but it's a sort of a positive, sort of high level indicator really of the trends in ASB, regardless of whether it's been reported to the police or local authority. We find around 15% of ASB is reported to the police or the local authority. So we know that the figures we have only represent a very small portion.
Can I just ask when that would be available for members to receive?
We can circulate that. So, I mean, some of it will form part of the next performance and insight report.
I appreciate that, but if there's some hot off the press that will give people an up-to-date picture of what's happening, that would be incredibly helpful.
Sure.
Members sorry, Councillor.
I just made a comment, actually. I live in Worksop. Councillor Troner's right about all what he says. The canch is terrible sometimes. You daren't walk down there at night time. It's true. I daren't take my dog down there, and I live near town. I just daren't. The lighting's fine, but we never see a policeman walking down there between the 6. I go to the Priory across the road to church, and there's never anyone around there, so I know that fact. I actually put this in one of my questions, but I didn't ask that because Councillor Tran's doing it. Worksop has got hot spots where it's really bad. The field on Kilton, I've had several reports. It's not my ward across the road, but I do send it on. We've had quad bikes churning up all the fields, which you probably do know about. And I nearly killed someone on Westgate the other day, coming down there with the bikes coming up the other way on one wheel. And I wrote it in here to ask you why we haven't got people around or officers around. You get a lot of abuse, which I'll say if you move. I had a bunch of guys walking down there on the road. I said, do you know what a pavement is? Because they don't. But they just don't listen to you anyway, because there's no consequences for them and there's no police around or PCSOs. We don't see them, and that's the honest truth, we don't. I want to walk through Worksop. I walk my dog around my estate, I'm safe. I don't go anywhere else out of the town because I just don't go out on my own. I do love my own, but that's not the point. We have got lights up, and as Councillor Tony said, the CCTV doesn't stop them. They're not interested in being caught on a CCTV camera because they might go home and nobody bothers anyway. They are out at late at night, and you're correct. On a Saturday night, if I'm coming home from somewhere in my car, which a lot, they are around. And these are young as 7 sometimes. But how do we get to parents? We have to do a lot more in schools, I think, to encourage that. And I think it's worth when police, we've got a fantastic chief constable in our area who's there, and she's absolutely amazing. And she's really lovely. and she does listen. And if you say anything, we get a response. I'm just writing now about something else that's happened, so we do get. She's very on top of it. But can't do much without the manpower, you know.
Thank you for your kind words about Inspector
Wonderful,
Inspector Hayley
yeah.
Crawford.
Hayley
She
Crawford
is
is
she is
wonderful.
really proactive. The parents must take some responsibility here. I was really surprised when I went out and there was some young boys who were messing about with knives, and they got arrested and taken to the custody suite. And not there was four boys, and not and because they were under 18, they need to have an appropriate adult for interview, and the parents were called to ask if they'd like to be their appropriate adult for their youngsters, and not one of those out of four, not one of those parents were offered to come down to see their young people in custody and be their appropriate adult, which really worried me, because you can understand if those young people aren't getting that support from their parents, why they could be going wrong. Yeah.
You're welcome. Councillor Taylor, is this a follow-on? Or
Yes, follow on. Could I agree with you, Commissioner? Some of the problem is the parents. Fully agree with you. However, there's also an element that police officers believe that they can't take anyone in under 18 in most cases. And if they do, they're under quite a lot of scrutiny. And that is the belief that officers have. So it doesn't encourage them to go to a young people's antisocial behaviour, because if they take them in, they're under quite a lot of questioning on why they've done it.
Well, I'm sure the Chief Constable has made a note of that, and we'll look into that. Thank you. I'm just mindful that we haven't yet reached the end of the questions on your annual report. We have drifted into one or two other matters, but I think we've given everyone a real opportunity to raise specific issues. I've just got one before we move on to your next report, Commissioner, and that is the recruitment of the Chief Constable. I happened to be with regional colleagues a few weeks ago, and they were struggling as to what type of approach they might take. So I mentioned your emeritus approach that you deserve to be congratulated for, in the way that you undertook the recruitment process, which was incredibly well received. It was open, very transparent. A number of forums were involved in the appreciation of who might be the candidate, and I think it served its purpose in delivering for us an excellent Chief Constable. And we look forward to the Chief Constable's roundup when she's had a full year in office, which I'm sure will be very interesting, notwithstanding that you faced two very difficult circumstances in a very short space of your tenure. And the panel certainly welcomes the approach that you've had to take in very difficult circumstances. But your exemplar approach, I've told people to contact your office, so don't be surprised if you get some inundated reports, but credit where it's due. I like to give that publicly. So thank you for that. Thank you for your report. Thank you, colleagues, for all your questions. If there's no further question on the annual report, can I ask people to move then to item 6, the Commissioner's the Commissioner's update report. Get my pages. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the words about the recruitment process for the Chief Constable. The College of Policing are sending people our way too, because we are getting inundated. But I was actually speaking to the Chief Constable this morning, because we did a lot of listening from the force and from partners about what were the needs in the new Chief Constable. What do we need right now? And one of the things that were really clear was about a great team leader who was going to look after the team. And actually, never has that been so important as when we've had the tragic situations we've had in Nottinghamshire, and and how the new chief constable and has directed her team to show leadership and to look after the well-being of those that have been involved with the tragedy of Op Hendricks earlier on this year, and then when we lost Sergeant Graham. It's not just not just looking after the shift that knew him, and we're involved. You've got the shift that knew him from Radford Road, and you've got the people who actually were responding in Newark and saw what happened there too. But how the force under the Chief Constable's leadership has looked after everybody who's been grieving so much, and the well-being that's been put in, I'm really reassured. And that's, I said to this morning that looking after the team was one of the things I was after in the new Chief Constable, and I'm really grateful that the Chief Constable took such a great lead
and a heavy dose of resilience is required.
Yes. Thank you. So I've gone off what I wanted to say, but I thought that was important, and it just reminds you of the bravery that our officers show on a daily basis, as they work so hard to keep Nottinghamshire safe. You'll see that we've got some new objectives in our Make Not Safe plan. We've got lots of work still to do. I'm proud of what we've done, but there's always more. I want to ensure the delivery of the Not Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, and we were speaking about this morning at the Safer Neighbourhood Board. We've got a really strong strategy there, and we want. It's such an important area. We've also got the out of court disposals framework. We've spoken about the need to we're doing some good work to get people off drugs, but there's so much more we need to do. Working closely with the Criminal Justice Service. We've got the immediate justice pilot starting in January, and supporting a wider rollout of the rapid response video programme. I need to bring to your attention the new victim care contract. As I said before, the people who access victim care are better. I've said they're better able to recover from being a victim, but I wasn't happy with the amount of people who were accessing the care. The contract at the moment is an opt-in, so people are asked if they'd like to have victim care support. The contract going forward is an opt-out. So unless you tell that you don't want to be contacted by victim support, you will be. So I'm really hoping this means that more people will get the offer of will be able to better recover. We've also got a new specific under 18s victim care offer, and a new restorative Nottinghamshire service, which will be launching this week, 1st of October. As I've mentioned before, I've just launched the latest round of community chest funding for organisations in your area, and we've worked out where we've had an innovation fund, and we've worked out where we think all that money is going to go to too. So we've got some really exciting projects coming up. I've also done a lot of work to support the development of the independent and scrutiny advisory groups. I'm probably not going to go through much more of the police and crime plan, because I'm sure you've got loads of questions to ask me on my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We have got a few questions. I think I'll start with Councillor Taylor. I think you had a question first. And were you first? No. Okay, you want to come in after. Thank you. I'll take Mrs. Harding first then.
Nicola, can I bring you in here, please? Because you're the one that's been so involved with putting this together, and I'm really hoping this is going to break the cycle of reoffending as well.
Okay, thank you. So restorative justice, just for anyone who's watching, just to be really clear what it is. What it does is it brings the person who's been harmed by crime and the offender into communication with each other. Might be a meeting, might be through a written conversation, but it brings them together into some form of communication. And we have had a restorative justice offer in Nottinghamshire for a number of years. It's safe to say that the numbers going through that service have been very low, in common with many PCCs across the country. They've been very low, and I think we've been aware that it's not really fulfilling its potential. And there is a really strong evidence base for restorative justice, really very strong. There's been multiple randomised trials which have demonstrated that not only does it reduce offending, it also helps victims to get some sense of closure from the crime, and also gives them a stronger sense of satisfaction with the criminal justice system as a whole. So there's a really strong evidence base there, but we knew that what we have wasn't quite working. So what we set out to do was to think, well, if we're going to do this, let's do it properly. How do we make this the very best that it can be, and to follow the evidence base? And the evidence base around reoffending is very particularly around violent and acquisitive offenders who are likely to reoffend. So what we have done is to join it up. We've talked with the Prison and Probation Service, both locally and nationally, also with the city and county councils with their youth justice, with their youth justice provision, and the prisons. And we started to have a conversation with the CPS, and then I think that sort of didn't get taken any further because of capacity. But we're very keen to talk to the CPS and to courts about how we can join it up, and there is a steering group taking that forward. The new service will start on Monday. It will start on Monday, and there will be a formal launch, which I know the Commissioner is very keen to invite lots of people to. That will be in Restorative Justice Week, which is in November. And it will focus initially both on an offer to victims around restorative justice, and then very particularly on an identified cohort that probation locally have identified around those who are violent and acquisitive offenders, not domestic abuse or sexual violence, but those who are most likely to reoffend. So it's very targeted, following the evidence base, and it starts next week.
Did you want to come back, Suma?
Oh, it's working now. I would hope that perhaps, probably not in November, but in the new year, if we could have just an update on how it's progressing, because obviously it's in the early stages from October. But we'd just like to see how it's working, because obviously you've said that the take-up hasn't been very good, but hopefully it will improve, and we'd like to see how that performs. Thank you.
It's not just a take-up, we need to see the results of it, don't we? So people not, breaking that cycle of people offending is so important.
Thank you. Mr. Bob Bourne, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On the Make Not Safe plan, the first cross-cutting objective is around strengthening data sharing, evidence and insight, showing as amber. There have been multiple recent media reports about police forces' data breaches. They've varied in nature. A firm in Stockport that makes ID cards for Greater Manchester Police was targeted by a ransomware attack. Cyber criminals have breached IT systems of a contractor in charge of producing warrant cards and staff passes. Norfolk and Suffolk Police admitted a data breach involving personal data of victims, witnesses and suspects in cases including domestic abuse incidents, sexual offences, assaults, thefts and hate crime. Perhaps the worst of all, the Police Service of Northern Ireland released data within a spreadsheet containing the surnames and initials of current employees, along with the location and department within which they work. So I'd like to ask you two questions. What conversations have you had with the Chief Constable about data security? And what assurance has the Chief Constable given you about how Nottinghamshire Police's data is being appropriately handled and kept secure?
Thank you very much. I've had formal conversations at the accountability board, and obviously I speak regularly with the Chief Constable too. I'm really reassured that what happened in those other forces couldn't happen in Nottinghamshire because of the safeguards that are in place. For example, the that freedom of information request that came in, and they sent out a document that had got embedded things. Embedded things is not the right technical term. Apologise, but how our force sends out is a PDF that doesn't have anything else that you can get through to. So that couldn't happen. There's no way you can get to that raw data. Also, we print our own ID cards. I know GMP use that other organisation, but we do that internally constantly. With the online training, whether induction and refresher about data protection and GDPR, that happens all the time. And we've also got really high levels of security on our laptops and mobile devices. So I regularly ask questions, but I am reassured that Nottinghamshire is in a good place.
Councillor Smith, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I'm not sure if this is the right point to ask this or not, so I'm just going to go for it. Caroline, you know, at the moment, it seems like we are constantly hearing more and more that a police officer's been assaulted here, a police officer's been assaulted there, while they're doing their job. And I know I asked this the previous Chief Constable, and I didn't know if there was, because it never came back, but what can we do as local authorities to help rebuild that trust so people aren't in the mindset of, oh, it's the police, let's attack them. We need to work out a way that we can move forward as a partnership. And like I say, the previous Chief Constable, it was at the point as he was just leaving, so it kind of never came back. But I think we really need to sit down and see what we can do. It was just last month I was reading that another officer was assaulted, and it gives the wrong message to people. Councillor Richardson was saying earlier that the kids, they're just not bothered about the police, but it's because they've got no respect. We need to find a way of building that bridge, and I don't fully know how to do that. But I want us to be able to move that forward.
Yeah, I would welcome more conversations there too, and also we have to, the police have to earn trust and confidence, and that is something I know our Chief Constable has absolutely got a laser-eyed focus on. But any ideas on working in partnership to also share how the police are there to keep people safe. I was at the Youth Commission, Youth Commission, it really worries me that when I see a police officer, I see somebody there who's going to keep people safe. And not everybody feels the same way. So we've got to do more stories about the great work that Nottinghamshire Police are doing. Because it's not acceptable for any officer who's there to keep us safe to be hurt.
Thank you. Councillor Mahone, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mohammed. We've had focus groups and we've had meetings with the majority black-led churches, and we've had events. They haven't come back to us with their final report yet. So I don't know how close we are.
It's not far off.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's a big ongoing piece of work. Want to add anything there?
I don't think there is. No.
Thank you. After Op Hendricks, there was lots of what George goes to, the
Independent advisory.
Can you say this? Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So ultimately, Op Hendricks was a real sort of catalyst for improvements in engagement with a number of groups across the city and county, and we've introduced, or we're looking at introducing a new structure for the independent advisory group, which has got quite specific cohorts of engagement with LGBTQ communities, asylum seekers and refugees, African and Caribbean, traveller communities, South Asian, a youth IAG, a disability IAG, and a student IAG. So there's a whole infrastructure that really wasn't there before, which is now sort of being developed locally to really capture that momentum in positive engagement.
But that gets come off the back, hasn't it? Those about
absolutely, yeah.
I could just follow on, Chair. Yeah, I agree with that. But it's the quality of it, and I'll raise it in more detail. But the issue is that if we're going to build trust and confidence, it needs a systemic approach to all aspects of policing. So the conversations we've had today, we're going to have about complaints, to advisory boards, to stop and search, are all related to how people interact. And the question for some communities is, at one time they feel over-policed, so i.e. the overrepresentation in stop and search of BAME communities, yet at the very same time under-policed when they are victims themselves. They don't believe they get a quality service, the complaints are not taken seriously, but this is in the later report I'll bring out. But I just thought, with my conversations with Pastor Clive Foster and Dr. Ezekiel, that you were a lot further with that report than you are now. So there's a misunderstanding somewhere.
Did you want to come back? Okay. Well, I've got a long list for you now, Commissioner. I've got Councillor Ellis, Councillor Carlton, Councillor Edwards and Councillor Smith. So we'll start with Councillor Edwards now. Thank you.
And, I asked, well, how are we doing? And he said, well, it's actually on the YouTube video, this bit. I actually thought it was the council that was holding it up. If only we can work on it together, because you said, I am really keen to move it forward quickly, on record. So I checked with my officers and they said, we've got a date for when we're leaving. And then 3 weeks before they're due to leave the office suite, which had been kind of designed for them in the work they do in emergency planning, the news came through that the aim of moving the police station into London Road had been dropped. So what I'm interested to know is, why did you change your mind? Why didn't you foresee the critiques that compelled you to change your mind? And what do you think you'll now be doing about sustaining a building for which the PFI runs out in 2027?
Thank you. When we spoke about moving into the shared fire building in the Meadows, I thought that was going to happen. But when we're working with the council to make that happen, the council kept putting their prices up until it just wasn't good business sense to do it. I don't want to add any more on that.
That's certainly what delayed the decision, and then obviously in the meantime other things happen. Different people have a perspective on the use of buildings as well, so I think it just all came together to mean it wasn't the viable option that it perhaps was at a point in time anymore. So that decision has been reversed whilst further considerations are taken going forward, as you mentioned, given the deadline on the PFI.
So you're saying that happened between March and May, but in March you said, let's really work to get it done. So are you saying the prices changed then?
So it wasn't a case of the prices changing. What happened was, and obviously I inherited this decision was in the process of being progressed. The plan originally was that some income generation could be achieved from Riverside, and there was the sort of cost that we thought we could recoup from that were quite significant. Ultimately, this didn't transpire, and that wasn't an option. So actually, we would be faced with a situation where we'd had an empty place that we were still paying for, and then paying for something else on top. So it's not that the costs changed; it's just that what we thought we were going to achieve just didn't materialise to the extent that it's been thought previously.
Chair, you'll understand my frustration at how the story changed there within a couple of minutes, and also I don't think I'd heard that explanation that I've had there from an officer of the police before that moment.
It seems to me this is quite a complex,
Well,
specific issue,
let me just get back then to reinforcing. We're in a situation where we have got people dealing drugs in an atmosphere that causes real danger for the people of the Meadows. In two locations recently that are both 3 blocks away from where the new police station would have been, and 6 blocks away from a major focus of some of the major problems that we've got in the Meadows. And just that sense of the emphasis was we needed the police to be nearer to the people who were suffering these kind of problems, and that's been lost. And it's incredibly disappointing. And the question still comes back, because I've heard some terrible naivety over this, that, there's some spaces in the north of the Meadows that would be available for a police station. I know the facts on some of these places that people are talking about, and I know they're not available because commercial property development is going to take over. So just what are you going to do about trying to solve the situation with Riverside Police Station for 2027 when the PFI runs out? That's the next question now.
I don't think we have the time, wherewithal, or the information, certainly in this forum, to be able to answer your question.
Well, I would ask for one sentence at least.
Well, what I was going to say was, obviously, clearly, you've got an issue you want to take up with the Commissioner and or the Chief Constable. I'm not sure who's in that arena, but it isn't something we can continue to debate here this afternoon. None of us else in the room have got the facts or the figures. I sympathise with the questions you're asking, Councillor Edwards, but I'm not sure we can take this any further at this particular point. It seems to me it needs to be taken up outside this meeting. I just think it's PFIs, and I've had history of it in wearing other hats in the past. They're very complex issues, and it's not something you can answer in 2 or 3 minutes here, I don't think, and do justice. And we have lots of other things and lots of other people waiting to ask questions. It's a genuine issue for you. I appreciate that, but we can't enter into understanding and about what goes on in the PFI with lots of complex issues. But that's if people are content, I just feel that's the appropriate way to deal with this at this moment. I'm conscious of time, and we've still got a lot of people want to ask questions on this particular paper, and then we've got the performance update as well. But I don't feel I'm, or my immediate colleagues here, can contribute to a discussion about premises and PFI.
I don't get it. You should be wanting to have a sense of what's happening with the PFI project, and I would have thought there could be one more answer that might be helpful on this.
Well, I'm not suggesting that it doesn't come back here. I'm merely saying that none of us have got that. You may have, but certainly I have no knowledge of what the PFI constitutes, and wouldn't dream of passing any comment on it. And I'm not sure that we can continue with this debate. We have empathy with the question that you're raising, but I think it has to be addressed outside this particular panel's abilities to get involved in it. So I'm sorry, but that's my decision at this stage. And I apologise to Councillor Ellis. I missed him off first of all, and he was the next in the queue, so I apologise to you.
Not only missed me off, crossed me off.
I crossed you off.
I can see.
I was busy trying to get my inhaler out.
Page 75, paragraph 8.1, the Commissioner's report. You talk about the right care, right person toolkit, which basically means that the police will no longer be the default responder for mental health concerns. I understand that the Metropolitan Police are introducing that from September now, and I just wonder what's the position in terms of Nottinghamshire Police. What discussions have you had with the Chief Constable and other agencies affected? And I think that the panel's discussed it in the past, and we have concerns. So what mitigation is in place to address the risks? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ellis. We've had lots of conversations with this. It's something that's particularly close to my heart. We're progressing well, and I'm actually confident that we are working in line with the ambitions of the right care, right person. We've refined our policies and terminology to be compliant, but we're starting in Nottinghamshire in a better place than Humberside, who did the right care, right person pilot. And actually, an example of that is the lower Section 1360 detentions that we have. We have 34 compared with 50. We've also got lower handover times. We do know that there's more to do. A working group meets regularly. We've got the next one on the 13th of October to review the progress of the right care, right person matrix and to show impact on all agencies. And we've got some College of Police in training. Our police officers will want to keep people safe. And actually, I know from personal experience that when somebody was in mental health crisis and the police were the only people who could help, not myself, but a family member, the police were there and kept that person safe. So I will be forever grateful, and I will be forever making sure that the police can do what they can to support. I do need to be honest and say that one of the issues that remains is troublesome is the availability of mental health beds. That is an issue. It's not just here in Nottinghamshire; it's around the country. So, to get somebody into where they need to be, as you know, we've got the vulnerability hub in our control room. We've also got the triage cars with a mental health practitioner and a police officer, so they can work together. We had slightly different terminology. We talked about it was the appropriate agency. I think we're going to call that right care, right person. Just it's the same kind of thing, but just a little bit of rebadging. But I'm really proud of the pioneering work that we do in Nottinghamshire, and I'm certainly not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We need to keep people who are really vulnerable safe.
Did you want to come back, Councillor?
Yes, please. I'm like Bob Bunyan, I'm pleased to hear that.
Yeah.
It does sound like we're on the same page, and as you say, we want to keep people safe. And things like the triage cars has been a great step forward, and I think we recognise that the police is not just a crime detection agency; it's an emergency service, and when you need help, the police are the people you call for, whether it's a crime or otherwise. So I'm glad to hear that. I would like you to keep the panel up to date with the developments along those stuff, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Colton, sorry to have kept you.
No, it's okay, Chairman. And actually, given the Commissioner's response to Councillor Ellis's question, my question's been answered already. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I would say my apologies, but I do need to leave at 4 o'clock as well because I've got another meeting this evening. So my apologies in advance. Commissioner, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, recently said that the police aren't paid to dance with drag queens at LGBT plus events. Last week, Humberside Police announced that they've banned officers from wearing makeup and glitter at Pride events. And last month, the Met Police announced that they've banned officers from flying the rainbow flag. Do you support this stance?
Short answer, no, but I can explain why as well. You know, it's really important that everybody has trust and confidence in our police. And actually, historically, our wonderful LGBT diverse community haven't had that trust. So, and actually, I need to be honest that in the police force, they haven't always got it right by people who are serving in the police force, who haven't always had the respect they should have to be who they should be. So, if somebody is off duty and wants to go and go on Pride dressed in sparkles all over, absolutely good luck to them, because we need to make sure that all of our community feel that the police are going to be there for them. I'm really proud that in Nottinghamshire we have the LGBT. I don't want the actual. It was the police conference for LGBT happened in Nottingham. It was the same week as Pride, and I actually went. I went there and spoke just to reassure, and that was a national conference that was here. I did hear a story there that upset me. That was years ago. An officer had been to an event. It was a gay officer, but he wasn't in Nottinghamshire, but somebody had been had killed, and somebody said something horrific about one of the police officers, something horrific about this, and it really upset him. And because of that, he never came out in the police force, and that's we that's just not right. And also, I spoke from my heart when I was there. I won't go into everything I said, but there was a lady who said to me, "I've never kissed a Tory, but I changed my T-shirt for you."
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions for the Commissioner on her police and crime update report?
Just a quick question. It's mentioned that you went to these pop-up sessions in various parts of the county. What were the comments that you got back? And bearing in mind, I think you went to Sutton in Ashfield and West Bridgford, which are two different areas, quite diverse in personalities and customers. I'd just like to know what they said.
I actually find I get better conversations from being at events and doing my own pop-ups, because you probably gathered I'll go up and chat with everybody. Actually, it was a lot of it was about antisocial behaviour in both places when you went, and also not understanding what a police and crime commissioner does, and not understanding what the complaints process is. They were themes across both. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you very much, Jen. It's just a reference, this one, to I am really pleased on the Make Not Safe delivery plan that you've got, that we haven't got any red. It's amber and green. I'm just wondering, well, there's a question here, but it's not what I want to ask. The difference between amber and green. I've had this question of scrutiny. I chaired scrutiny last week in Basildon, and they asked this same question. This lady councillor did. The difference between what are the numbers or the stats between that you haven't got red, so we're fine. And what makes the amber green, and how do you work forward to make that green? Because generally we get a column that just says amber or green or whatever, but it doesn't say how you're moving forward to make those ambers green, if you know what I mean. Thank you.
I do, and behind our one-page summary delivery plan, we've got loads more work. And when we use a magical percentage, I don't know how you do it, but even if it's green, I always think there's more to do. Do you want to come in on that, Dan?
Yeah. I mean, it's I think in some areas where it's not, it's not something that's necessarily a numerical count. It's kind of a bit of a value judgment on where we are and where we expect to be, by this point in time. So there is a process, as the Commissioner said, that there's a lot of detail that sits behind each of those actions that sets out the activity that's taking place, what's expected by when, and where we are in terms of outcomes delivered, and that's all used to form a bit of an assessment really on the red, amber, green status. Which we review, on a monthly basis formally. So I don't know if that answers the question or not, but
excuse me, it's still quite early, isn't it? As it says, it is quite early in the year. So obviously by the end of the year, I'm going to keep that page, and I'm just going to see what moves more green than it does amber.
It will be very honest.
Yeah.
I'd love it to be all green, but if it's not, you'll know.
Thank you.
Councillor Taylor, thank you.
Yeah, on the same item, I'm always concerned when I don't see any red. When you've got only ambers and greens, I would suggest that the targets are not tough enough, that you've set the plan too simple, and you're not really delivering because you're not stretched. If you've not got reds at all at this stage in the year, you've been very, very lax in what you set.
I would disagree. I think we've been very ambitious, but we are delivering. And if you'd have been here last year, you'd have seen we did have red on there last year, and it progressed as the year went on.
Thank you. And that leaves us now to move to the performance update, item 8 on your agenda.
Thank you. May I pass over for Dan for this, please?
Yeah, I'm happy to sort of take it largely as read given the time, but got available. But just in terms of sort of headline points, obviously you've got the full performance and impact insight pack there, which will no doubt generate quite a few questions. But I guess the key issues from our perspective are that continued deterioration that we're seeing in public confidence. So it's starting to plateau, but we have certainly over the last 2 years, ultimately we've seen that deterioration. We're now 3.4 percentage points below the 2020 baseline. We know that this does form part of the national trend from the other indicators that we've been monitoring. So it's been compounded by the case review and standards of behaviour at the Met, and a whole range of other factors. But I guess it's just to reassure you really, there's a whole package of activity that's been put in place to address this. So ranging from the Force's new prevention hub and a new police board, which is focusing entirely on earning trust and confidence in policing. We've already touched upon kind of the whole range of new engagement structures that have been put in place, particularly following recent tragic events. We're doing much more to promote scrutiny that we're doing in the OPCC and across our various partnerships in stop and search, use of force, complaints, and so on. And hopefully, don't want to steal your thunder on this, but moving towards that more public-facing accountability board. That's clearly kind of the sort of the headline concern, really. That steady deterioration in public confidence. I'd also mention the reducing offending rates. Again, it links into the conversation we had earlier around that rising levels of acquisitive crime, potentially linked to the cost of living crisis and some of the wider issues there. Again, we're doing a lot of work through our reducing offending board and the new role looking at women and girls in the criminal justice system to better identify needs and meet the needs of that cohort. And we're also seeing a reduction in general satisfaction based on our policing crime survey in policing services. And there's a range of hypotheses as to what might be driving that, linked to increasing levels of public expectation. You'll see in the report that calls for service have been rising. Similarly, demand on the police has been rising over the last year. And we recognise that there are opportunities to better manage expectations at first point of contact. So this is all something that will be considered and reviewed as part of the new force board. Positively, though, areas of satisfaction remain high and strong in the areas that we're prioritising, the areas of high vulnerability and high risk, such as domestic abuse and hate crime. So they're the kind of 3 areas of concern. There's a whole range of positive exceptions in the report. So the crime remaining lower than the pre-COVID baseline, the upturn in positive outcomes for victims of crime, and some surprising figures as well. So things like, according to the police data, we are seeing an 8% reduction in antisocial behaviour in the current year, which is at slight odds with some of the issues that we're hearing in pockets across the area. And similarly, violence with injury and knife crime, according to the official stats, down 6% in the last year. So that's something that can probably may sort of challenge perceptions ultimately.
Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you. Mr. Bob Vaughan, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Picking up on Dan's first comment there about public confidence, we, the panel, have heard about this ongoing trend now for many months, including what the causes are believed to be, engagement work and analysis since. The start of the decline has been blamed on the kidnap and murder of Sarah Everard. Sarah Everard was kidnapped on the 3rd of March 2021. On March the 9th, a serving Metropolitan Police officer was arrested on suspicion of her kidnap. On the following day, the 10th, her body was found. That was 30 months ago. Just because trust and confidence in Nottinghamshire is following the national trend doesn't mean it is an acceptable position, either for our communities or for our hard-working police officers. So what can the panel expect to see that will make a difference to trust and confidence, and when can we expect to see it, please?
Thank you very much. We've touched on the fact that the new Chief Constable has got one of her objectives is to increase trust and confidence. And there's loads of work that she's doing, including the new preventative hub. There's going to be lots of opportunities for people to understand more what Nottinghamshire Police are doing, more opportunities for ride-along schemes and walk and talks. There's, I think, I take your point about how long ago it happened in London, but it just feels that since then, the media are just loving just pushing loads of negative stories out about policing. But that people do still have trust in Nottinghamshire Police, because we're getting more calls because they want us to do stuff, want the police to do stuff, and if they didn't trust us, they wouldn't be calling. I don't think it's okay to bring the Chief Constable in just quickly.
So I couldn't agree more that it's not an acceptable position, and that's not something that we rest on our laurels or are complacent about at all. I speak regularly to office and staff right across the organisation, and it's always something I talk about, that the reality is it's not just what's happening nationally, we have to take ownership of what's happening locally as well. It's already been mentioned by Councillor Mohammed around how we need to make sure that our organisational justice is appropriate, that we are using our powers properly, that we aren't disproportionate in the use of those powers, but probably most importantly that we're transparent and open about that, and we share those figures around our stop and search, our PSD investigations, and we have that engagement with the communities, and if we aren't getting things right, we accept that and we do something about it. So one of my priorities for the organisation is that we're going to earn the trust and confidence of our communities, and I've quite specifically used the word earn because I don't think we've got it at the moment. Yes, of course, we are going to be affected by what happens nationally, but we can influence it locally. And some of the things that have been mentioned today around how we manage and deal with antisocial behaviour, how we respond to calls, that we treat them appropriately, that we don't dismiss people when they're reporting antisocial behaviour. Those are the sort of things we can do to improve trust and confidence locally. Because I think a lot of the time, if people have an engagement locally, that will override what they see nationally. But at the minute, it's the national agenda that seems to be the loudest. So we're working really hard on that. So lots of pieces of work that I could go into, things like the VORG, delivery of the race action plan, our recruitment and retention policy. There's lots of things we can do that we've identified as a number of deliverables that we're going to do in order to earn that trust and confidence and work towards that priority. But very clearly, I'm not in the game of just blaming that nationally. We're going to take ownership of that locally and do something about it, and I'm very clear about that with the whole of the organisation.
Thank you.
I'm sympathetic to everybody involved on that side of the room when it comes to dealing with the media. But I think they say something like, well, good news doesn't sell papers. And there's an analogy I could draw, but it's not suitable for a public meeting. But the punchline of it is because they can. Okay, and it they the press and the broadcast media, perhaps less in the broadcast media, but certainly the press, are likely to print adverse stories because they sell papers and they sell advertising. It's a source of great frustration to me.
Thank you for those comments. I've got Councillor Ellis, Councillor Mohammed, and then Councillor Edwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just follow up on this question? Thank you for the answers, but it's, I suppose, specifically to the Commissioner. As the political lead for policing in Nottinghamshire, what are you doing personally to raise confidence in policing? Thank you.
I think increasing transparency, bringing and also trying to get us to tell our stories about what we are doing as well. But we've got next month it is November, isn't it?
November, yes.
It's the November Accountability Board will actually be live streamed, so people can see the questions I'm asking, and that means it won't be filtered by the media. They can understand the good stuff that we are doing in Nottinghamshire Police. I'm also going to ask if the public would like me to ask questions on their behalf of the Chief Constable and Police team.
Thank you. We've got Councillor Mohammed, then Councillor Edwards. Thank you.
Chair, forgive me, but I want to follow on from Bob and Ellis. The issue of trust and confidence is probably the most critical issue facing policing at the moment. Our inability of having consent in diverse cities of Nottingham has a huge impact. And I immediately want to differentiate the amazing, courageous staff we have as police officers. This is a leadership, cultural, strategic issue. And I'm not getting a sense, and I hope I speak on behalf of the panel, that yourself as a police crime commissioner and your office needs to be distinguished from operational policing under the chief constable, that both of you can demonstrate a clear sense of what it is that we're talking about, but also having true grip, and how you can demonstrate accountability for the chief constable in delivering this. There doesn't seem to be a coherent plan. There seems to be lots of actions in different thematic areas in policing, but not a single dashboard or a key performance indicator sheet that says this is how we're demonstrating it. That's come to panel. It's all over the place, and this is the timelines we're going to get into to get that trust and confidence. There's a lot of talk, but I'm not seeing when we see it and how we will see it and how we're measuring it.
We're measuring it massively. We have the police and crime survey, which goes out throughout the whole of the city. Actually, can you talk about the survey and how it goes out and how we are measuring this carefully?
Yeah, so it reaches 4,500 people every year. It covers every lower super output area, so every community of 200 houses. So every single year and a half, I should say, it works on works around the force area. So it's extremely robust in terms of the sampling that it achieves. And within that, we have a whole raft of indicators around trust and confidence that we're asking around visibility, whether the police understand the crime and ASB issues that are affecting you, whether they're responding effectively to them, whether they provide value for money. There's a whole sort of raft of key performance indicators, and I think there's probably more that we could do to make that visible to yourselves, really. So we have brought it here in the past and done a little feature on it, but I think that it probably does sort of warrant sharing more widely, particularly the breakdowns at sort of local authority and CSB level.
Yeah, so I am monitoring that, and I will be asking. I ask questions of the police based on that, and also the race action plan is really important, and that our office are taking a real leadership role to hold the police to account to make sure they're delivering on the race action plan.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Can I just follow on, Chair? So I 100% agree that activity is being done. All I'm saying is maybe it'd be best if it be brought in a specific report and that we can clearly see it. I absolutely are not doubting that activity is happening and the Chief Constable is doing stuff. It's the transparency and the visibility of clean data coming towards us.
I think the Commissioner's taken that on board. Thank you. Excuse me. Councillor Edwards, Councillor Intronet and Councillor Taylor. Councillor Edwards, thank you.
Well, Chair, I want to try and be a bit positive on this, not least because just before a recent public meeting that I was having with the local Member of Parliament, one of the police constables came out to me and said, "Mike, you never talk the police up." So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll introduce the police officer first to the meeting and I'll celebrate what he achieved. So I said, so first I'm calling the police constable and we can announce that they've done warrants on 2 houses in the neighbourhood. And the police constable said, it isn't 2, it's 5. So I got told off for not being up to date on the latest facts even. But here's the story really, is just that Operation Reacher just has this contradiction within it that kind of says we've got to be private to be effective, to get things done, tied in with the comments we've just heard about how we require increased transparency. So I don't particularly want to moan about Operation Reacher again, because I think there are things that I can definitely celebrate. Although I would add, I think it's come once the neighbourhood inspector has got involved. He's given a certain focus that's meant more of this stuff is visible. So I think something is going on. I absolutely understand why this is a challenging situation. I'm not going to go through all my complaints about all the things that had to happen in the Meadows before something was done. Don't need to do that again. And we can celebrate that 11 people out of 13 who were involved in a murder trial were convicted for over 20 years for what they did. But I would like to have a quick chat with the Chief Constable again about this afterwards, not least because there's another idea about what I think I might do that I can help to resolve the situation. It just gets me when I had the repeat at the public meeting. I had a bit of the police constable had a bit of a jib at me 6 weeks ago, and we had the follow-up meeting this morning. And as I left the meeting, the 2 drug dealers were in the alleyway again, and I'm still got this real problem that's going on. But as I say, I've got half an idea of something I can do to help the police, and I'll have a quick chat with the Chief Constable afterwards. So I don't know what I'm doing really, Chair, other than bearing my soul, but that sense of, we know this is difficult, but we know it's something that's got to be done. And this thing about, we've just got to increase our transparency, there's this just contradiction going on about whether we want transparency or whether we need secrecy. And it's one of the reasons why people in my neighbourhood at the moment don't think things will get sorted in time. Something bad has to happen first. And I'm sure that's not where the police want to be. I don't want them to be in that position either. Let's keep working at it so we can do better.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. I'm sure the Chief Constable's made a note of all the things you've been saying. Thank you. Councillor Intronet and then Councillor Taylor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just with regard to the comment you made, Dan, about the feedback on the police and crime survey, I don't know if I got the number right, at around 4,200. That represents about 0.5% of the community in Nottinghamshire. So if there's anything we can do as community reps to help improve that engagement so that you get higher degrees of feedback, then please ask. So that's just a comment. On the confidence number, I will take issue with your comment about the starting to level out. I suppose if you realign your y-axis so that it's not 0 to 70%, it's between the 40 and 50 or 40 and 60 where we're actually operating in, you'll see a difference, because in the last 3 months we've actually seen the confidence rate decrease more quickly than we did in the 3 months before that. I think what perhaps does concern me is that, yes, we do have the issue with media, social media, and I suspect that there are some people in our positions that don't always help that, because we try to find, and the world seems to try to find negativity far too often rather than the positive stuff we do. And again, we can potentially help with some of that. But that said, if we look at Bassett Law and Newark's figure, which is well below 50%, it does worry me there, particularly when we talk about representation and resources, etc., in those two areas that make up 60% of the county and 30% of the population. And might I respectfully suggest that if we were to look at one option which may make a step change in some of those areas, is just having a bit more high profile in some of those high profile areas that a number of us have mentioned in our communities. And I know that means additional resources, and I know the challenges around that. But you may be aware that, at last week's full council meeting of Bassett Law District Council, there's a further request going to come to you to talk about the resources allocated to Bassett Law and Custody Suite and Police Station. And I would again respectfully ask that, please, can we just reconsider that? Because we as a community are unhappy with where we are. As we see it, districts like Newark, districts like Bassett Law are paying per person more than other areas in the county. We don't have a problem with that, but we do have a problem when we see that we get significantly less resources. Because some people say to me, we're paying for Nottingham's or this area's policing. And I'm not wanting to cause confrontation with other districts, but that's part of the problem we have, because quite clearly in the city they've got their own challenges as well. I understand the difficulty in trying to be everything to everyone. So that is one point I would make. Secondly, another one, just a very quick one on numbers that I didn't quite get. We talked in the annual report, page 15, of having 2,439 police officers or officers. Yet on page 5 of the report, in the same period to March 2023, we've got 3 numbers. One is deployable officers, the head count of 2365, and I know that doesn't include people on maternity, long-term sick, seconded out. We've got FTEs, which is 2329, as near as damn it. And then we've got officer service strength in FTEs, which says that includes everyone in the notes, which is 2407. I'm just wondering why there's that disparity in the two numbers, given that this is probably the most high-profile number you've got in your report in many respects.
Thank you for your offer to help, Councillor Introna. I hope you really mean that, because I am concerned when you're doing negative posts on social media talking about the lack of resources, it's actually affecting the trust and confidence in Bassett Law. There's an opportunity for everybody to get involved with something called Speak Up Knots. It's part of it's through the serious violence. It's part of listening to what people want, and it's I don't know if you follow me on social media, but I'll put posts on there. It's called Speak Up Knots. Please share it, all of you, so we can listen to our communities and our partners. I would welcome help to get that spread wider. The numbers in here are right. Do you want to explain the difference?
Yeah, I can do. I mean, they are all measuring sort of slightly different things. Obviously, your full-time equivalent will be the number of individuals, or the total sort of full-time officer service strength. Your head count will be include those that are working part-time and so on. So they are all. I think following a previous meeting, we did agree to actually rationalise this section and just include one sort of clear figure that so as not to sort of confuse the public. And so I think sort of going for that would probably be quite helpful to do going forward, because but there is a there is a rationale behind each of these figures. Deployable, will exclude, as there's a footnote there in the paper, but it excludes those that are on a career break, maternity, adoption, long-term sick seconded out of force. So it's looking at your service strength at any given time, despite your establishment figures. But I appreciate that we're probably sort of showing too much here, really. So it kind of leads to an element of confusion. The trends will all be the same.
Okay. Can I just come back about demand as well, Councillor Trona? Demand is constantly reviewed by the Chief Constable, and I know there's a big piece of work going off there at the moment, and I just wanted to reassure you that I'm always asking questions. The estate strategy is always under review, and but I know you're desperate for a custody suite up there, but we currently have enough custody provision.
If I may just come back, just very quickly, if I may. What I'm after is the full consultation that you promised. I do take a bit of exception of your comment about social media comments. You made that comment in March this year. I've tried to move on from that, and since I've asked you if you want to have a one-to-one, you never even had the professional courtesy to respond to me. And in that meeting in March, you also said that the only people that were making noises about Bassett Row were myself and Councillor Nigel Turner, which at the time you knew to be completely untrue, because I'd sent you information relating to other people's involvement and requesting the matter a few days before. So I have tried to move on, but your comments just now are completely unhelpful. Thank you.
I'm not sure that I think silence is probably golden here for me. That may be a debate you need to accept what you're saying. Maybe it's something that... Sorry? I wasn't doubting that, Councillor Trona. I'm merely saying that perhaps that's something that needs to be discussed outside the meeting. I'm not the person to referee in this particular. No. I think it's a shame if there's a breakdown of communication or a misunderstanding or whatever might be behind it. But perhaps it needs a separate session with someone who's good at facilitating to take this to the next most appropriate discussion. I'm mindful of time as well, but thank you for your comments, Councillor. Councillor Taylor, can we make this the last question on this particular paper, because we have one more to deal with?
Thank you. The public perception and confidence of policing is not about individual police officers. I would say the vast majority of the public, far higher percentages, have real faith and believe in the hard work and excellent job that individual officers do. What I believe it is saying, and I'm sorry if I'm going to get political here, having had 10 to 12 years of cuts in policing, the public are not confident that they're getting the level of policing that they used to get. They don't believe that they're getting what they want either, because of the slashing of the numbers. And I praise the work of the officers, but I say that the people of Newark are not getting what they deserve. And I'm not saying it is the Commissioner's fault. I'm not saying it is the Chief Constable's fault. I'm saying that decisions that have been made over the last 10 years have been a disgrace. And things such as doing away with Newark custody suite, it may be an easy thing for you, Commissioner, to say, well, it's not happening, it's too expensive. It didn't used to be too expensive. And you may say we've got enough cells available in custody suites, but that doesn't mean that the services that is being delivered to the people of Newark or Bassett Law is anywhere good enough. and losing that custody suite. Yes, it's only 10 cells, but that makes a massive difference to the policing in Newark and Bassetlaw. And you bring it back and you'll see those figures go up. And the trouble is, at the moment, well, we've got a lot of very, very junior officers, and seeing junior officers having lost the massive experience that we lost as a political decision to get rid of senior or experienced officers, and now they're realising it was a major mistake, and that is why the public are saying they don't have confidence in policing, but they do have confidence in the quality of our officers.
I don't feel I should talk about what happened before I got in post. It wasn't my decision, as I've said before, to close the custody suite in Newark. Nottinghamshire Police has never had as much money as it does, has never had as big a budget as it does now. But we need to be really realistic about the complex demands that are on Nottinghamshire Police have increased too. So, I have a duty to make sure we have an efficient and effective service, and I've got to balance the book. So some forces didn't lose as many officers as we did in Nottinghamshire. It was that happened on the other police and crime commissioners' watch, not mine.
Commissioner, one of the things that I think could be helpful, I know that you're looking for a date to arrange for a sort of an induction or a refresh for anyone who wants off the panel to come and visit yourself and the new, so it's those people that particularly haven't been to the new police station, police headquarters. But it might also be helpful to give a landscape picture of crime now compared to what crime was 10 years ago. Most of us probably read in the papers and on the TV that the amount of cybercrime that takes a huge amount of resources now, and it's probably not the place to do it here. I'm merely suggesting it might be useful, because if you compared some old papers, probably from a decade ago, of what were the priorities for policing, it would look quite different today. It doesn't necessarily answer the questions Councillor Taylor's asking, and I'll leave that for yourself to deal with later. But I think there is something about, we have a lot of new members who have joined us as well, and those sorts of things are quite helpful to understand a little bit of history and what the pressures are today, along with the additional funding that you've managed to accrue successfully over a number of years.
But I'm very forward focused, Chair. I don't know how helpful it is to look back at what we had 10 years ago. We need to look back. We need to look at what's going to happen over the next 10 years and make sure that we've got a force ready for that. I don't disagree with that, but there's a bit of context, isn't there? That's the legacy here of what life was like, and it's where we are now, and then your futures, isn't it? That's just a personal view. It's future I'm looking for. Yeah. And make sure I've got, a balanced budget and a force that's got the right resources to deliver, and we're doing all that supportive work and preventative work. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm recognising perhaps the knowledge of everyone around the table is quite different, and the access to a lot of the information that you've had isn't always available to new members. It's just helpful to give some historical background and then the futures and then what the demands are now. I'm merely offering that as a suggestion. Councillor Richardson.
Just a comment, Chair. Yeah, I've been on police crime panel before. I've rejoined again, but I just want to say government cuts, not PCC cuts, has caused the problem.
Yeah, maybe, but we are where we are. We're looking to the future. We are where we are. I can't remember, but I think that was the last question from this particular paper. I'm mindful that people's concentration probably is drifting now as we've run over time. You've got paper 9, the Commissioner's update on force complaints. Commissioner, I don't know whether you want to...
Actually, I was going to ask Dan to take a lead on this. Thank you.
Okay, so yes, this is the annual review of the police complaints, police handling of complaints and complaint reviews that's undertaken by the APCC as part of a DIT sample each year. So this is looking at complaints from the calendar year 2022. So the team in the APCC looked at 72 complaints to assess whether they were handled appropriately. Either under Schedule 3 of the Police Reform Act, which are the formal complaints, or outside of Schedule 3, which is sort of the quicker and more efficient way of dealing with complaints at the lowest appropriate level, and it's been shown to sort of generally lead to more satisfaction among sort of complainants. So what did we find? Since the last DIP sample, we've seen a major increase in the number of complaints, or of the DIP sample, the proportion that were dealt with outside of Schedule 3. So that's gone up from about 2 to 38 in the last year, and now around 73% of complaints are dealt with outside of Schedule 3, which is leading to a much more efficient process. So you can see average time taken to resolve complaints has dropped from 96 days to 27 days amongst those sampled. There's been a slight increase in average case times for the Schedule 3 complaints, but that's really due to the fact that more time has been freed up to deal with those smaller batch of more complex cases. So the DIP sample involved 10 cases that were dealt with via Schedule 3, and it's hard to generalise really based on such a small sample of those, but we did find some important areas for improvement. So amongst the complaints DIP sampled, details of whether the service provided was deemed acceptable or not was not captured in all of the outcome letters. So there were 4 cases where that detail wasn't captured. There were around 3 cases where there was a lack of documentation relating to initial assessments. There was 1 case, so it was 1 out of 19 eligible cases, and that's probably some context that you do need as part of this paper to understand how many out of how many eligible. So it was 1 out of 19 cases where there was no outcome letter, and no offer of a right to review in 2 out of 19 cases. And we also found some inconsistency in when terms of reference were agreed with complainants. So there was around 6 out of 19 where that was the case. So, having undertaken the review, the forces sort of reviewed and responded to the recommendations, and in every aspect that was identified, they put remedial action in place, whether that's advice and training for staff on the process, the templates being used. Investigations team sergeants are now reviewing cases on a monthly basis to ensure that terms of references are agreed. And there's sort of a whole range of quite specific actions that have emerged as a result of the DIP sampling. And I think ultimately what the report, I guess, really highlights from our perspective is the positive impact that the PCC's complaints scrutiny is having on sort of testing and driving improvements in the complaints handling process. The force have quickly acted on the sort of areas for improvement that we've identified. And we hope that this is leading to improvements in the experience that complainants have when raising issues of concern.
Thank you very much, Dan. One question for me is, do you have comparative analysis with other forces in terms of how these measure?
We don't actually, no, not to my knowledge. I'll check with our sort of lead officer, but I haven't seen any sort of DIP sampling comparator information, but I can ask the question.
Any other questions? Councillor Inglis, thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick one, really. We've got the figures from complaints from, I take it, members of the public. Is it in our remit to see what figures are like for internal investigations against officers? Is that part of our...
Not as part of this, but I think we have brought sort of PSD reports previously that have given kind of the profile of, and how that profile is changing in terms of kind of misconduct and wider PSD related issues. But it wasn't within the scope of this, I'm afraid.
Okay, well, if there are no further questions, can I thank everyone? I'm sorry we run over a little bit, but thank you for your forbearance, and duly close the meeting. Thank you.